to... hindi, actually medyo mainhin kaya, Admiral. So lagay ko ng extra.
Naka-live ba to o record lang tayo?
Live yung audio mo. So ingat. Pero we can edit final version just in case. Okay. Hindi naman kailangan, as always. Alright. Welcome back everyone sa latest episode ng Deep Dive. Nako po, ang dami natin pag-usapan at kasama natin today. Hindi ito si Justice, hindi ito si Secretary, hindi ito si Senator. Kasama natin ulit si Admiral Romel Jude Ong. Thank you very much, Admiral, for joining us. Kasalo ko, naiinis kapag sinabi ko Justice or Senator. The same way na si Ronald calls me Christian and the other way around. Pasensya na, Admiral, for yung mga 2024 moments natin na ganyan. Kamusta po kayo, Admiral?
Okay naman. First of all, Happy New Year, Richard.
Happy New Year to you po. Happy New Year. It's been a while, but there's so much to catch up on. Of course, as we speak, may purge na nangyari sa National Security Council, tinanggaling dalawang Dutertes. It's something I want to talk to you also about. But before that, you have had two actually very interesting pieces recently. And actually, I want to go even to another piece later on when we discuss your theory of victory. No, fantastic work. So there are these three interesting works of yours that, Admiral, I want to focus on. But before we go to dun sa denial strategy, before we go to theory of victory and what the Trump 2.0 administration could mean, magsimula muna tayo sa mga minamahal natin na pamilya na Duterte, right? So as we speak, Admiral, you're free to disagree with me. As we speak, ang daming mga marites, rumors, allegations, sometimes even reports na may mga konting smoke, konting agitation, or there's certain destabilization plots. Admiral, as someone who served at the highest levels in the Philippine Navy, who comes from the AFP among other things, what is your understanding based on open source information? Because both of us have nothing confidential to share.
Well, of course, pinaka-open source na source mo would be the Dutertes themselves. They were very public about it.
Exactly.
I think it started out last year. Nung medyo nag-start to break off na yung unity. Okay? And they were very vocal about it. And I think Sec Ronald was able to actually curate yung chronology of statements or pronouncements nila regarding this quote-unquote destabilization. No? And I think that's part and parcel ng toolkit nila ng messaging nila.
So you're saying it's just psychological warfare?
Well, you have to go back to the time of President Duterte's term of office.
Yeah.
And ang ano ko dito, the way I frame it is part ng governance o yung management style ni former President Duterte is actually how to integrate yung uniformed services, the military, the police, dun sa kanyang way or approach towards running the country. Sa police, nakita natin to in the terms of Oakland Tokhang, yung the drug war.
Right.
Yun yung pinaka-ano niya. And yung drug war was not confined to the drug war. It was also expands to how he would manage yung political opposition niya, particularly at the local level.
Right.
Diba? Ilan yung mga LGU executives na...
So basically, personalization of the armed forces, subjective control, as Samuel Huntington would put it. That's what he wanted to achieve over the security services and armed forces.
Yeah, precisely.
Ito kasi yung working theory, Admiral, no? And you know, I'm just trying to be the sounding board here. Ang working theory, and this is partly based on anecdotal evidence, conversation with people who are in the armed forces or working in the government, including just the other day. Ang basic idea there is that unang-una, maraming nagkaroon ng utang na loob kay Digong dahil they owe a lot of their promotion. Some people, we don't need to name names. Next thing you know, biglang 2-star, 3-star general na. Some people were able to skip, you know, and to suddenly nag next level sila in terms of their promotions. Some mumbo jumbo happened there. And then at the same time, he increased significantly, I think more than any of his immediate predecessors, yung sweldo ng kapulisan, ng mga benefits, and not to mention, of course, personally, he visited like 45 AFP military bases in his first 6 months in office. I mean, that was insane. So you're absolutely right. There was a very concerted effort to turn the armed forces of the Philippines into his personal army. Obviously, your contention is that failed, and your
Okay.
contention. So what is your read of that? And should we worry that actually there may be some questionable elements still?
Okay, it was a deliberate effort on his part. Tama ka yung sinabi mo. But actually, 6 months, first 6 months niya, if you recall, iniikot niya halos lahat ng military council.
Right.
And he was engaging not only yung leadership but also yung tropa, the troops. Okay. And of course, sinabi mo na yung pinasa niya sweldo. Okay. Then also, in a way, pinakailaman nila yung yung promotion and assignment system.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So they have their own people not in favor, no. But hindi ko pwedeng i-isolate na kay President Duterte lang yun eh.
Right.
Kasi nangyari din naman yun sa ibang presidente eh. Kumbaga,
Arroyo.
and even during the time President Pinoy.
Yeah.
Okay. Meron din siyang selection process eh. Okay. So we cannot say na si President Duterte lang gumawa. Okay. Kasi at the end of the day, trust and confidence ng Commander-in-Chief yung nakasalalay doon eh. So
Right.
I do not begrudge him yung ganong approach towards selecting leaders, no. Ang mitigation naman kasi ng armed forces diyan, may culling system kami.
Right.
Through the board of senior officers. Nakal na yan eh.
Right.
Kumaga, doon sa field of candidates mo, let's say 10, nakal na yun eh. Doon lang naman siya pwede mamili. Hindi naman siya pwede mamili beyond that eh. Yung mga medyo problematic na, nakal out na yun.
Right.
Wala na yun eh. So, we are assured na kahit sino yung piliin niya, kahit sino yung paboran niya, competent yun. Okay.
You mean professional?
Professionally competent na yun.
Yeah.
Yung X factor na lang doon o yung it factor na lang doon is close ka ba doon kay Commander-in-Chief. Then that gives you the edge na ikaw yung medyo aangat compared yung peers mo. But that's a given. We accept that eh, na hindi naman patas yung dyan eh. We all secure our own level of competence eh. At some point, yung sa'yo, na-reach mo na, yung ADA sa angat yan kasi mas malapit sila sa Commander-in-Chief. And yung other aspect naman na binanggit mo, yung utang na loob. That's a
Yeah.
trait.
It's powerful. It's powerful, isn't it? Yeah.
Very powerful motivation, utang na loob.
Yeah.
But then, babangga tayo ron sa institutional guardrails
Yeah.
na sinet up ng armed forces. Even if may utang na loob ako sa iyo,
Yeah.
handa ba akong basagin yung guardrails na yun
Right.
that protects the institution from you because of yung utang na loob mo going beyond that yung limit na yun. And that's where I think yung institution is strong enough to ensure na hindi yan mabubuwag. Okay. For various reasons na nai-instill na o nai-inculcate na within the institution itself.
So in short, I think both of us the same assessment. I mean, on the record, I've been writing about this throughout the years na yung core integrity ng Armed Forces of the Philippines was preserved during Duterte administration despite successive efforts by him to essentially undermine yung professionalism and integrity of the institution. Nevertheless, just to be clear, Admiral, sino ba tong mga nanggugulo or mga alleged itong mga letters daw ng mga military officers, etc. Are we talking just about a bunch of ex-generals who are bored and have nothing to do? The reason I ask this is because, we had Justice Carpio here on this show multiple times saying that may mga tao na gusto nila RevGov. And some of them have been even reaching out to more respectable elements to kind of say, kung gusto natin matapos itong lahat ng gulo nito, mahina yung presidente, itong mga Duterte, ewan, RevGov na tayo. Who are these people? I mean, obviously you don't have to name names, but what is the sociology of these people? Are these just a bunch of ex-generals, ex-officers, some of them probably not even generals, na maingay lang, na nanggugulo lang?
Well, there are some retired generals that are spouting that line or thinking that terms or some who have connections with the military. before.
Yeah.
Pero of course there are these meron naman chatter on the rep.
Right.
But I look at it not as the problem, it's more of a symptom. Kasi what we're looking at here is yung tingin na parang nag-fail na yung mga institutions tapos
Right.
wala ka na matakbuhan.
Oo.
Okay? Wala ka na matakbuhan. Hindi ka na
Correct,
matakbo sa Supreme Court. But again, this is a perception. This is a perception issue. So wala ka na matakbuhan.
Yeah.
Parang hindi ka napaghinaan ka ng loob sa Congress dahil of course yung issue sa budget. Medyo napaghinaan ka ng loob sa Supreme Court.
Right.
For one reason or another.
Right.
Medyo napaghinaan ka ng loob kay Presidente kasi sa tingin mo medyo malamya yung yung approach sa rate sa problema. Okay. So wala ka na matakbuhan. Okay.
Right.
So ang court of last resort nila o court of appeals nila yung armed forces.
Yeah.
And there is a reason for that. Yung may historical context yan.
Of course.
If we go back to history natin, mas naunang na-set up yung armed forces kaysa yung Philippine Republic.
Right.
Okay. 1 year. Okay. I think it was March of 1897 sinet up yung armed forces o yung Revolutionary Army. Then of course we had June 1898 yung Republic. So nauna yung armed forces na set up before the Republic. So in a way, the Revolutionary Army was the enabler to ensure for that Republic to take root. Okay. So merong historical context yan. Okay. And of course, if we go by recent history from martial law of 1970s, the armed forces was the enabler of the martial law. For good or bad, it was the enabler. If you go to 86 Revolution, which is that the current template now is create that critical mass to people power to convince the armed forces to actually change sides. So yun pa rin naman yung formula ngayon.
Right.
That's why we have this maisog rallies. That's why we have this attempts at people power dyan sa EDSA Shrine.
Right.
The reason,
Right.
even if it failed, the formula is the same. Create a critical mass so that it will convince the armed forces na they need to change sides. Now, meron kasi underpinnings yan doon sa Constitution yung na hindi naman napag-uusapan palagi yung the armed forces is supposed to defend the state and protect the people. But this is, kumbaga ito, pinag-uusapan lang sa loob to ng armed forces, ito naman namin nilalabas yan is, what if we are confronted with an ethical dilemma that you have an oppressive state and an oppressed people? So, saan lulugar si armed forces?
Right.
So, under that scenario, obviously, you will protect the oppressed people against the oppressing state. Okay? But that is not something that we publicly debate on or discuss with. But yun yung underpinning. So, kaya dito napupunta sa yung makikita mo, and it's coming from the retired military sector.
Right.
Kasi, napag-usapan na yan within institution. Okay. But how do you now say na this is an oppressive state? That's a matter of that's a matter of debate, and it's a matter of perception. Okay. Kasi at the end of the day, we all go through that process. For example, during the time of the COUP, President Duterte.
Right.
As much as let's say me personally disagree with his policies, particularly yung China policy, how can I argue na binoto siya ng
May mandato siya Yeah.
May mandato siya So you have to respect that. Whether you
Right.
disagree with the policy of the commander-in-chief or not, whether you think that disloyalty na yung kanyang actions, still, may mandato siya binoto siya ng tao Eto, si President Marcos, ganun din. 31 million na vote sa kanya Whether you question the process of the vote or not, may mandato siya. Okay? Now, for you just to disregard that,
Right.
medyo malaking debate yan from within. Malaki struggle yan from within para sabihin mo, no, he lost the mandate.
Ganito kasi ang take ko dyan, Admiral, no? Of course, one school of thought is yung doctrine of civilian supremacy, right? That at the end of the day, it's the, essentially the representative of the people, meaning the commander in chief, the elected civilian who has control over the armed forces. And then, of course, we also have this tradition. I mean, this is a real tradition. A lot of our neighbors seem to be very fond of that. Thailand, obviously, is the most dramatic case to a certain degree. Even Indonesia, we see this in Egypt, in Turkey. This idea of Praetorianism, no, that the military at the end of the day is a Praetorian guard. That is it needs to undergird the stability of the nation state. And exactly as you pointed out, kanina, as one great sociologist said, wars make state. And in this case, the armed forces predated the creation of the Philippine nation state and the Democratic Republic. But the way I see parang a way out of this is, I had a lot of conversation with General Bautista, for instance, right, who was in charge of the Bayanihan professionalization attempts and all. And basically the idea there is fundamentally the armed forces in a functioning democracy, and this is also very Samuel Huntingtonian, has to be loyal to the constitutional order. So if you have a situation whereby the elected president, even though he has a democratic mandate, is weaponizing his position in contraposition to the constitutional order and the national integrity of the state, then the military has the prerogative, if not the duty, to resist, if not to strike back, even if it's necessary. I mean, how do you see that? And I want to also understand, bakit sa tingin mo, Admiral, the integrity of AFP was preserved? Is this the US element because of the training with the US, embeddedness within the US? Is it because of the Bayanihan reforms during General Bautista's reign, among others, and the security sector reforms we had with our allies and friends? And most importantly, was this also about institutional memory? Because I remember very well, I interviewed Secretary Lorenzana when we declared martial law in Mindanao, no, after yung Daesh ISIS attack. And this was for a piece I wrote for New York Times. And he said very clearly to me, he said, we remember the lessons of the past, meaning how Marcos weaponized the armed forces and of that, and we don't want that to be repeated. So this is not going to be the same kind of martial law. What is your read of this whole issue and this dilemmas, these debates that you raised?
Well, of course, ang start mo dyan would be 1986. That's a start kasi doon nag-turn around yung at least that would be the benchmark, no?
Yeah.
Yung turnaround. But it wasn't an easy turnaround. Remember, after 86, there were a series of coups.
Right.
Kasi there is hindi naman siya ganun kabilis mag-transition.
Si Admiral Ong to, Admiral Ong.
At that time, yung series of coups was also the height of the insurgency movement, yung local communist insurgency. So nagsabay yun. Kasi the peak of the insurgency was in the 86 as well.
Right.
Nagsabay siya halos.
Correct.
So dalawa yung problema ng armed forces, no. Yung internal struggle niya, because there are components of the armed forces that rebel. And the second is yung communist movement. Okay. And it went from until the 1990s. So, and remember, there was these several commissions in the 1990s. I remember one would be the Video Commission, I think.
Right.
This was an honest to good study kung bakit what is the problem with the armed forces? What is wrong with the armed forces? How do we transition the armed forces from the martial law armed forces to something that is more attuned to an armed forces in a liberal democratic state? Okay. So yun yung challenge to. So meron security sector reform process na inagawa yung armed forces. And it was not an easy one kasi as I wrote, you mentioned about yung article ko sa Raptor. In between 86 and President Duterte's term, meron pa tayo yung series of coups, then yung time ni Senator Trillanes, yung Magdalo. Then there was also yung time ni ERA, yung nag-turn around tayo.
Right.
And the armed forces was also involved in that. And one of the lessons doon is nung nakialam yung armed forces, it doesn't necessarily mean na it turned out well for the nation. In fact, ang pinaka-principal tinamaan doon is yung national economy natin in both cases. Okay? So, kumbaga, the cure is worse than the problem itself. Okay, so that's the major lesson doon. Pag nakialam yun, of course, it doesn't mean na everything is going to be nice and rosy na affair. It's not. It's going to be a messy one.
And the EDSA DOS was also complicating, right? Because post hoc, essentially, was it Chief Justice Davide, right, who kind of gave a constitutional legitimacy to what happened to Arroyo, which is the armed forces essentially becoming the final arbiter. Because alam naman natin, it was not the people, the protesters in EDSA per se, who ended ERAP's term. It was when Angelo Reyes, it was when the AFP withdrew its support from Estrada, and that's when his administration became untenable. So that, because for me, diba, like this is, we're talking about 2001 already. So way after 1986, you have another case of Armed Forces of the Philippines becoming the final arbiter of a major political shift. What is your understanding of the effect of that?
Well, cause and effect yan eh. The cause was the sinuportahan ng armed forces yung change of administration.
Right.
The effect was you have to justify it legally. Okay, so that's why sinuportahan yung, from a legal sense, binigyan ng basbas na okay, it was constitutional. Okay. Otherwise, we're gonna have a revolutionary government na naman on time na yan. That's my read of, yan yung reading ko ng why it transpired that way, or why it happened that way.
Because one thing I want to understand is because after that, ang dami rin coup d'etats nung panahon ni Arroyo, di ba? I mean, one of our guests here, you know who, I think had 3 coup attempts against Arroyo. It's like, sometimes magkausap ko itong minamahal natin guests, parang medyo weird talking about democracy. Wait lang, sir, ilan ulit nakatatlong coup d'etat yata kayo, di ba? But you know, I mean, diba? I mean, that was how gulo ang sabog ng Pilipinas nung time na yan, diba? And this is the 2000s, mid-2000s, late 2000s. So it's only,
medyo new generation na yun siya, si Senator Trillanes kasi. We were the first one. Yung generation namin was the post. Kami yung kami yung in between the martial law and the administration. Kumbaga, when we started the academy, Marcos was the president. Nung nag-graduate kami, si President Cory na yung nag-commission sa amin.
Right.
So kami yung one of the few classes na transition classes. We came in during martial law or post-martial law. Then, nung nag-graduate kami, revolutionary government na ni Cory.
So obviously, for good reasons, I mean, there is a school of thought that says baka a big part of this is misogyny, because if you map like out 90% of the coups happened during the 2 female presidents we had, Corazon Aquino and Arroyo. So, you know, probably the element of misogyny was always there. But for some reason, walang coup na seryoso nung panahon ni Pinoy, even though we had the Mama Sapano situation, a lot of other major political scandals, and also obviously during the time of Digong, and so far under BBM. So what do you think explains the fact that we went from a country that was having coup right and left from 1986 all the way to 2006 and 7 and 8, and then suddenly you have the absence of coup and all in the past essentially decade? What explains that, Admiral?
Well, number one, I would disagree that misogyny. I think we would respect.
So you don't buy that misogyny aspect?
I don't do that.
Okay.
Akin kasi, yung kay President Cory kasi, ang hugot ng armed forces was she released all the communist leaders at the time. Kasi consistent naman yung armed forces even during martial law, during time of Cory, even up to the time of President Duterte. The nature of
but didn't Ramos also make a lot of sorry, I just want to push back for it. But didn't Ramos also make major concessions, including to the Misuari and all of that? Shouldn't that have been the reason? Or just because Ramos himself is an ex-military but essentially could nip things in the bud? Is that what?
Siguro it's a trust issue then. May trust issue. Not misogyny but trust issue. But again, balikan ko lang, yung hugot doon was ang armed forces consistent naman anti-communist yung stance niya. Whether during the time of the Marcos Sr. up to the time of President Duterte, even up to now, anti-communist yan. So, I think they gave FDR a wider berth in terms of
Yeah.
ang premise nun is he knows what he's doing.
And he's one of us. I mean,
Ah, ah, pwede siyang kausapin kung medyo ano na, and he's surrounded by people that are with the military also. So I think merong ano yung communication lines are open and they're being used. Nung time kasi din President Cory, she was surrounded by people that are naintindihan ko naman against the military. Kasi sila yung nag-suffer nung martial law Okay.
yes.
So there was an anti-military bias
Yes.
doon sa ano niya, doon sa nakapaikot kay President Cory. So the communication lines between military
Right. Walang
and President
interlocutors to keep things
merong
on. Yeah.
medyo hirap. And that was only resolved after the series of coups. Medyo nag-open up yon kasi one of the casualties of that was na-request I think was natanggal si Executive Secretary Arroyo. I think that was one of the
Joker Arroyo.
Point, yeah. That was one of the points raised, and that was the pagkumbaga yun yung
right.
That with that medyo nag-open up na yung communication line. So smooth sailing na si President Cory until nag-transition to FDR. Okay. Nung time naman ni GMA, the issue was corruption.
But wasn't there corruption under yun nga. Again, I mean, I don't want to be too woke, Admiral. And of course, I know you may take it as an insult if I imply misogyny. I have all the respects for the Philippine AFP. But a part of me just cannot dismiss the fact that some people tend to take female presidents less seriously than not, precisely because of some element of misogyny. I don't know. Again, you're free to disagree with me. I'm just saying I'm having a hard time not seeing that playing some role. Maybe not as big, but some role perhaps.
I can only base it on my own personal feelings. No?
Sure, you know better than me, the AFP, obviously. Yeah.
Sa akin pala kasi ang nakita ko naman, sino ba naman mag-ano kay President Cory? Very respectable president. Okay. Si GMA naman, at least during yung earlier times niya, he was very competent. He was a very competent economist.
Yeah.
So, you have to hand it to her. Okay. Now, merong corruption issue siya. And I think si Senator Trillanes would be a better person to discuss yung kung why is it worth.
Mahaba yan. Tatlo yata yun. It's like...
So, kasi at that time, I was still, yung areas of assignment ko were not I had no contact with the politics of the organization.
Right.
It's more of the internal mechanisms na So hindi ko siya kapa, kumbaga.
Right. But as you have both Navy background, but anyways, I'm not gonna push the point too much. Admiral, going back to this, I asked point blank both Senator Trillanes and Justice Carpy about this whole Salvador Panelo going on. Well, there's I think only one channel bothers to interview and take him seriously. Kumbaga, he said something like, marami dyan sa loob ng military, hindi natutuwa, ganyan. And then I asked point blank, is that not an incitement to rebellion or some sort of agitation or something? And I think Justice Carpio said something like, well, that only works if you're taken seriously. So if no one takes it seriously, it's not an agitation or incitement. And then, point blank, Senator Trillanes said, Salvador Panelo is a clown. So, let's just leave it at that. But what is your read? Do you think he's talking about, maybe he is just the loudmouth guy who is articulating something that we should pay attention to? That perhaps we shouldn't be too complacent, Admiral?
Well, ganito yan you have to segmentize yung security sector, no? So number one would be
because it's not monolithic. It's not monolithic, absolutely.
Yeah, it's not monolithic.
Absolutely.
Second is you have to look at active and retired. Okay.
Exactly.
So among the retired, you can further segmentize it into yung recently retired and yung talagang matanda na. Okay.
Because the recently still has influence, residual influence.
Correct, may residual influence.
Okay, good.
So ang akin naman, basta retired ka na, civilian ka na Like me, civilian na ako I can say anything. as long as it's not based on confidential information or confidential document, I can say anything. For or against government, it's my free speech na yan eh. And
Right.
if you're talking of yung retired, and they say something against the government or against certain personalities in government, they're entitled to that opinion. Kasi private citizen na sila eh. Of course, hindi mo madi-divorce yung the fact na they were part of the armed forces once in a while, once upon a time during their when they was in the active service. That's that eh, the given na yun. But to me, kung ano may sabihin nila, whether for or against government, as long as it's just nilalabas lang yung sama ng loob
Right.
and not taking arms, then they're entitled to that. I would consider it an expression of free speech. Now, kung yun yung nahagip nila, let's say they attended a meeting or they attended an event, tapos naglabasa na sa mga loob, yun yung nahugot niya, yun yung ikikwento niya sa labas. Okay. But again, parang nagkwento ka lang kung ano yung napag-usapan yung party or yung meeting eh. And I would not take too much value. Ang importante, yung active service guys natin in the armed forces are professional.
Right.
They follow the Constitution. They follow the chain of command. They have the integrity and the fidelity to follow yung mandate nila. That's part and parcel of democracy. Everybody entitled to choose a side and defend yung side ng spectrum na political spectrum na tinaniman niya o tinatayuan.
Before I ask more, going specifically to your article on this navigating civil-military relations, is there I know you want to be polite and all, but is there a big difference between the situation in PNP and the situation in AFP? Still, if I can put it that way.
Medyo malaki kasi iba yung culture eh.
Right.
Pangalawa, iba yung vetting process. For example, lahat kami, we undergo the commission on appointments.
Right.
Iniimbestigahan ka niyan eh, bago ka ma-appointed. Sa kanila, Civil Service Commission, I believe, or yung napulpong nila, which is a different commission. Okay. So sa akin, merong difference yun. Kasi iba yung vetting process eh.
Right.
Sa Pangalawa, yung organizational culture, totally different.
Right.
And I don't have to explain. Very clear naman yun eh. Yung vulnerabilities ng Philippine National Police with respect to yung acculturation ng kanyang katawan.
And also susceptibility to political interference and subjective control.
Naka-embed, part and parcel na yun eh. Kasi for example, ikaw si Mayo, you are given the opportunity to select among 3 candidates kung sino yung yung gusto mo maging chief of police ng ng munisipyo mo. So that power already gives you certain level of oversight doon sa police na inassign sa'yo. And kahalubilo mo siya palagi. So iba yung level of exposure nila sa local politics eh. Mas immersed sila.
And therefore more susceptible to politicization, right? Exactly. While my degree of separation or healthy distance ng armed forces from let's just say the mud of everyday politics. Now,
hindi naman siya totally invulnerable, no? Kasi meron pa rin but
spectrum. I mean, it's a spectrum. Yeah, you're right. Like more on this than that. It's not either or. Yes, exactly. Admiral, going back to the AFP, dun sa article mo, you said the logical move for the AFP is to cut all vestiges of its links with the Duterte family. The low-hanging fruits available are, number 1, shutting down the Vice Presidential Security and Protection Group. Number 2, transferring back the responsibility for the security of the Vice President to the General Headquarters. Number 3, directing the Inspector General to investigate the dysfunction in the operation of VPSPG. Number 4, directing the Internal Auditor to investigate how the confidential funds received by the VPSPG was liquidated and obliged. this, for you argue, sends also a very clear signal to their patron, i.e. Zhong Nanghai, i.e. China, that the Dutertes are not sacred cows that the AFP will have to defer to easily. It also conveys a clear message to the general public that it will honor the trust according to the institution by doing what is morally and ethically right. Are we moving in that direction, including some of the reshuffling we're seeing right now, restructuring the National Security Council?
Okay, if you remember, yung Quadcom, tinurn over sa armed forces yung further investigation ng confidential fund. Okay, so the ball is the court, yung bola kumbaga sa korte na ng armed forces. So, they are obliged actually to act on that. Otherwise, the public will ask, ano nangyari doon? Okay, kasi pinasa na ng Quadcom.
Yeah.
For one reason or another, whether it is to avoid further antagonizing the Dutertes, or basically it was the proper move na nakita nila, yung bola nasa korte na ng armed forces. So yung minention ko sa article, those are the minimum that they can do based on yung mandate nila at saka yung powers allowed by them within the organization. Okay. Now remember, historically kasi yung security detail ng Vice President was either provided for by the Presidential Security Group.
Right.
Or it was provided by the General Headquarters through meron siyang office Naka-centralize lahat yung mga sundalo na nagpe-perform ng VIP security, not only for the Vice President, but for all others na merong nilagyan ng na deployan ng VIP security. So centralized for easy monitoring. Okay. Kasi minsan, meron mga nagre-request, hindi natatrack ng General Headquarters. Akin naman ang recommendation, pinabalik lang naman doon sa tamang opisina yung responsibility na yun.
Because Sara Duterte was creating her own parallel setup, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
May sariling batalyon.
If you recall, that group was created before yung nagpalit ng administration.
Right.
Diba? Hindi pa nakaupo sila President Marcos noon tsaka si VP Sara.
Naka-set up na yung batalyon. Because Dad was the former president, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What is your read of itong nangyari sa National Security Council ngayon? Obviously natanggal yung the father and the daughter, because usually you have ex-presidents also there, right? Because they're supposed to share ideas and make sure they're on the same page and the same wavelength on important issues. Clearly things we don't see with them. And at the same time, ang dami mga mga kaibigan ni Speaker of the House Romualdez ay dinagdag dyan. Ang dami mga deputy speakers. Now, what does that say to you?
Okay, number one, it's consistent with doon sa binasa mo sa article na simulan ko. You cut all vestiges of all linkages with the Dutertes within the security sector. So what I mentioned is only the armed forces.
Right.
But there are others. I think VP Sara is still the vice chairman ng NTFL COUP. I'm not sure.
Wait, hindi pa rin na-abolish yung NTFL COUP. Wait, I thought wala na yung LCAC na yan.
Ando pa rin. Kasi may insurgency pa tayo. May naiwan pa So, I'm not sure kung nandun pa rin siya.
Right.
And of course, yung na-mention mo, yung National Security Council, hindi lang si Vice President nandun, pati yung father. Because yung setup nun was all ex-presidents are supposed to be called in. And that's also the reason why historically, hindi kino-call in yung National Security Council yung buo. Ang pinapatawag lang Executive Committee, which basically
which Sara was part of also, the Executive Committee.
Cannot be avoided, part siya ng Executive.
Exactly.
Basically, mga cabinet members yung Executive. Okay, so that may exclude the father, but it doesn't exclude the Vice President.
And now they had to exclude. The important thing is November 25, right? The father wrote a letter asking bakit parang yung anak niya hindi inimbita, or more importantly, asking for minutes of the conversation of the Execom. Is this a case of them saying, I'm not sure I want to share to you the important stuff because it might end up in Beijing tomorrow? Is that what's going on here, Admiral?
I think it's kumbaga, it's a power move It's a power move on the part of Malacanang. So, and again, it's consistent with what I was thinking sa armed forces naman. Tanggalin mo na lahat ng connection niya.
Right.
Kasi yun yung ginagamit nilang pag-do it to yun yung ginagawa nilang soapbox to to make statement na national security in nature yung
Right, exactly.
So tanggalin mo lahat yung connection.
So decoupling, you're really calling for a decoupling here, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, my sense is that timing is also important because in a week or two, a new administration in the U.S. is gonna come in. Now we can have a long conversation about Donald Trump and but if you look at people in his admin, people are gonna run the Pentagon, people are gonna run Marco Rubio and the State Department, a lot his national security advisor. They look like people who want us to be even more involved in not only pushing back against China in West Philippine Sea, but also on Taiwan. My sense is they would want allies to pitch in more, to be more involved. At least this is the sense I get based on some of the conversations we have had with them or people in the Heritage Foundation, among others. So obviously, if you're China, you want all the minutes of the real latest conversation with the Trump administration to be forwarded to their friends, right? I mean, I think the timing is also important, right? Because China wants to also figure out what could Trump mean for Philippines alliance.
Kasi if I were China, I will move the earth and hell to have President Marcos replaced. That will be my power.
Or to put Duterte in power, basically, which is more accurate, basically.
Well, yes. Kasi, kaya sinasabi ko, we cannot divorce domestic politics with geopolitics kasi connected yan.
Yeah.
Whether we admit it or not, nasa frontline tayo, and whatever happens to the Philippines affects the geopolitics of the region. Okay? And if I were China, I want a neutral or a friendly Philippines.
Yeah.
Now, ang tingin ko, okay, si President Marcos, medyo sinulog na niya yung tulay. Wala na kami naman yan. So ano yung power move ko dyan? I have to find a way na a friendlier president comes into power. So it's logical. That's why yung aking agam-agam kasi is we cannot isolate what's happening yung away pamilya, impeachment case, with yung US-China relations and competition. And of course, yung what's happening in Southeast Asia.
Because it's like a proxy war in a way. It's
yung dalawa, nagkiki-proxy ka.
It is a proxy war.
Nagpo-proxy war sila.
Speaking of this, I mean, I'm just curious, what is your read on this situation? Because on one hand, if you look at the portfolio, you look at the statements of whether Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, people who are gonna run the Pentagon, they all seem like China hawks, right? They seem very much like people who want even a tougher stance on China, whether on the trade front, on the security front. You see a lot of concern about Philippines, about Taiwan, and then of course you have Donald Trump, right? We don't know I don't think even he knows what he's gonna do, right? So you suddenly have the situation whereby will Donald Trump cut a deal, a grand bargain? I'm actually quite skeptical of that argument, but nevertheless, that's always the background noise. And then at the same time, you're gonna have this hawkish guy coming in and saying, "Go, go, go, lang tayo." What is your read? Do you think there'll be more continuity with what's happening under Biden? Do you think there'll be an escalation, or do you think there'll be a new indeterminacy, if I can put it that way? Because the reason why I ask you, Admiral, is there are some people whose argument is, I don't know if you saw it when Trump won. Duterte said, congratulate, and it's like, parang, congratulations to my great pal. Like, parang nagfi-feeling yung mga ibang Duterte people na because beshi daw si Digong at Trump back in the day, that, I don't know, Trump will save Duterte, and that because BBM was so cooperative with Biden, that Trump will be hostile to him, hindi daw siya in-invite sa inauguration. Like, there's that narrative. What do you think that narrative makes sense? Obviously, you can see where I stand on that. But why do you keep on hearing that narrative? Is it self-delusion, or is it muddying the water? Is it psychological warfare to say US now is more unreliable because Trump likes Xi Jinping, likes Duterte, doesn't like alliances, doesn't want to fight for its allies?
Okay, kasi ang tinitingnan ko lang, although tama ka naman, Mark Rubio, Rich Polty, China hawks yan eh. And more or less,
absolutely,
latag naman kung ano yung nila eh. latag naman kung ano yung policy nila.
Absolutely.
And yung mga pronouncement nila gives you a sense of saan yung direction nila. But si Trump, hindi pa naman yan eh. At the end of the day, but si Trump. Then there's another factor, si
Yeah,
Elon Musk.
exactly.
Okay?
So how do we hedge? So how do we hedge? That's my point.
Yeah. So, si Trump has already a statement on Ukraine. He has already a statement on Europe. He has no statement so far that I am aware of on the Indo-Pacific. Wala pa. So, kumbaga, medyo opaque yung ano niya eh, yung ano saan direction siya pupunta rito eh.
But didn't he say that Taiwan has to spend more on its own armed forces? They have to carry the water more on their own. He said that during the campaign period. And he didn't give a clear answer that he'll come to Taiwan's rescue.
That's Taiwan. But Taiwan is not the the center of the Indo-Pacific universe naman.
So you're talking about the overarching strategy in the Pacific, right?
The overall one.
Okay.
Kasi yun yung the missing piece eh. Pangalawa, there's a problem specifically to the US Navy, but to the US Armed Forces in general, that cannot be corrected in one term lang. And that is yung industrial capacity ng US has deteriorated over time. Okay, so much so that the PLA, the People's Liberation Army Navy, has superior numbers of competent vessels compared to the US Navy. Hindi mo makokorek yan agad. Okay? So even if the spirit is willing, let's say, okay, Trump, Mark Rubio, the new DOD guy.
You're saying there's a structural limitation. In 4 years, you cannot build 4 new aircraft carriers and 20 corvettes or whatever.
Correct. And the numbers game will have an impact on deterrence on the ground. Okay. Kaya nga kaya lang gawin ng US Navy ngayon, FONOPS eh.
Right.
And we've seen what capability ng China's Navy, Coast Guard, and militia combined. Pag nag-swarm or nag-surge sila sa Scarborough, second Thomas Shoal o Sabine Shoal, they can generate at least 50 to a maximum of 60, 70 vessels at any given time. Okay? Para i-blockade yung feature na yun.
Yun nga eh.
So, sabi nga ng according to Soviet doctrine, quantity is a quality on its own. But we have to deal with.
So, now where does the Philippines come in? Because you use the same term as Elbridge Colby, right? The strategy of denial. Can you tell us a little bit about your, Admiral, your discussion about strategy of denial? Ano yung kailangan gawin ng Pilipinas given this indeterminacy na hindi natin alam anong gusto mangyari ni Trump? And then, of course, there's the Elon Musk element that I don't want to underestimate. Because as we speak, Elon Musk is doing his own parallel diplomacy. He met the Iranian ambassador at the United Nations, apparently without any coordination. He seems to be very friendly to the idea of ending the war in Ukraine. Namely, he's not solidly behind Ukraine. Some say he has even business interests in terms of looking at mineral resources in Russia, who knows, even Iran. And obviously in China, he has huge business interests there. Tesla there. He said things about SpaceX. He doesn't want SpaceX to, for instance, maybe help Taiwan in a contingency situation. He denied the Ukrainians access at certain points. So when you have this Elon Musk element, when you have the Trump indeterminacy element, and then at the same time you have the Elbridge Colbys and Marco Rubius and Mike Waltz and all of these prioritizers focus on China kind of people, that's quite a major challenging. Yeah, it's like that's like 3 different directions at once.
Actually, I mentioned Elon Musk because Elon Musk has a substantial investment in China.
Right.
So he might swing it the other way.
Yeah. May I ask for that
Yun yung concern ko.
Charger, yeah.
And if you're reading yung social media sa X, right now, ang tinutumbok niya ay UK.
Oh, and Germany and everywhere. He's interfering na directly, diba?
Oh, he's doing his own malign influence.
And very shamelessly, diba? Yeah, and shameless. I mean, this is crazy. He's gone rogue. Elon Musk has gone rogue.
But we have to accept that he has some influence on policy, kahit paano.
Right.
So yun ang ano natin. Now, yung question, Mike, I didn't answer the question. It goes back to yung theory of victory, which has two components.
Right.
Okay, the denial one and the cost imposition strategy component. But I just focus on the denial one.
So can you
Which is
explain
more or
that
less
for the
consistent.
purpose of audience na hindi nagbasa ng I don't know Elbridge Colby's book or something, although thanks to him he gave me a copy of that, but sige, let's discuss what is the strategy of denial from a Philippine perspective.
Denial
Yeah.
is to create capabilities that will prevent China from achieving victory or
Yeah.
achieving success. That means you have to establish some resiliency right on para hindi niya makuha yung gusto niya. Now, ang ina-attribute naman kasi natin na victory conditions for China, dalawang component yun. Yung first component is one way for China to declare victory if it's able
May I
to
ask for the
successfully
power bank,
divide yung country.
yung power banks.
Okay? Pag napag-away-away niya yung target country niya,
Thank you.
pwede niya na-claim victory kasi it doesn't have to go to war.
Right.
Kasi tayo na mas mag-aaway. Which is why I am very concerned about yung domestic politics natin. Particularly if merong hint of foreign interference yung domestic politics natin. The second possibility of victory conditions for China would be if we are willing to give up national interest
Yes, the
natin
other power banks.
just to avoid escalation. And I've seen that happen in the West Philippine Sea on several occasions.
Right.
Yung parang, okay, para wala ng gulo, sige, we will do this, we will concede this. And ang problema dito, yung incremental concessions na binibigay natin, pag pinag-sum total mo yan later on, years from now, baka kinip up na natin incrementally yung West Philippine Sea.
I use my phone.
Just because we are afraid of escalating. So those are the two victory conditions ng China that we are trying to deny them.
That's important, Admiral, because sometimes I wonder, is it because masyado tayong focus sa West Philippine Sea and national security issues, but you know, ito, I don't know kung you have the same reading. Yung mga ibang kaibigan natin who are for good governance, and for good reasons, raising concerns about the budget, alleged and real anomalies, deficiencies of the Marcos administration, inflation, whatever. Would it be too cruel for us to say that they're the unwitting enablers of the pro-China elements in the Philippines? Meaning they're contributing to weakening the foundations of the current administration. Now, that is not to say that we should not criticize. I've had like 12 episodes with Justice Carpio on PhilHealth and all of that. But minsan feeling ko yung ibang kaibigan natin parang all-out mode to, without paying attention to, actually we're in the middle of a Cold War. As we speak, China is invested in destabilization of this country, and they have a major family more or less aligned with them. I mean, I think we should spell this out, right, Admiral? Are we being unfair because we're too focused on geopolitics and territorial integrity in West Philippine Sea, or are we just being brutally honest with people that this is not a normal political situation?
Actually, narinig ko yun kanina sa kabilang channel. They were mentioning that ang question
I'm sure
naman
yung
nila,
sa kabilang channel narinig niya na sinasabi ko yung kagabi, but
yeah.
I think may natamaan like I didn't mean to say anything. I just said parang ingat lang kayo, wag kayong bara-bara lang diyan, 'di ba?
Oo. Actually, I alam mo naman yung circle of yung mga kausap ko rin naman, ka-engage ko. Also is very focused on the budget. And I think tama naman na
yes, exactly. Again, yeah.
Ang dagdag ko na lang sa conversation, okay, while we're doing that, let's just be aware na ito yung if we do not calibrate, so the operative word is, if we do not calibrate our actions. Kaya nga ang inaano ko dito, yung pag nakusap ko sa Justice Carpio, sir, okay lang naman protesta tayo dito sa policy na to. Or yung is policy 1 o policy 2, policy 3. But we should be mindful na pag ang conversation is papunta na ng RepCo, patayin na natin yun. Kasi that would create the divisiveness that we're trying to avoid.
May guardrails
Na
dapat eh. Meron threshold
dapat,
eh. Yeah,
yes, okay lang yun, magprotesta to ang arts content.
sure.
But if ang conversation na is umaakyat na doon papunta sa okay, destabilization natin, RevGov yan, patayin na natin yun, sabi ko. Kasi we were going to play into the hands of China. We will be doing them a favor by creating the divisiveness within the country. So, calibration talaga yan eh.
No, again, just to be clear, Admiral, this is not hypothetical. This is happening as we speak. I literally see DDS or China affiliated accounts going through all my videos, and then they'll find anything to highlight. For instance, last week I had Professor Vicente Rafael, who used to be 1 year senior of BBM in LaSalle. And obviously he said something about BBM having certain recreational predilections, if I can put it that way. Next thing I know, they made a whole thing about the whole polvoron, the whole polvoron discussions and all, right? So, I'm just saying, naka-activate na ito eh. This is not us trying to shut down the debate or conversation. I have nothing against people who had no problem working for the BBM administration and then they're suddenly out of the administration. Suddenly they're all for budget transparency. I'm okay with that. Great, fantastic. I'm just saying we are in the middle of a Cold War here. People are weaponizing people power discussion. People are weaponizing all of these protests. In fact, we have a very serious recent case, Brazil, right? So if you remember the Operation Car Wash scandal in Brazil, first it targeted the administration. Then Dilma Rousseff went down. Then the vice president went down. Then the speaker of the... In the end, what happened is Bolsonaro and the military hawkish elements kind of essentially teamed up and took over. And Brazil went in a very scary, dangerous direction. Not officially RevGov, but some really dangerous mutation. So, I'm just saying, hindi ko sinasabi na let's not exercise our democracy, but I just want people to have eyes wide open. Na there are elements they're actively taking. I mean, the other day I had to call out a good friend of ours who is, an advocate for public health, public welfare, etc. And was sharing all of these things about my mga murmurings and discontent sa military. I said, who are you talking about? If these are ex-general and all, they really don't matter. Or you're talking. So, yun nga eh, parang I think people are really not understanding how serious the security situation here. In as much as I don't want to shut down the debate because I do believe in criticizing the administration on really the deficiencies out there. Yun nga eh, Admiral, I mean, am I being too paranoid?
Hindi, parang you have to play three-dimensional chess.
Exactly.
Because there are three or several levels of conflict that we're addressing or issues. So yung sinabi natin, yung domestic politics natin, that's one. Okay? The other one would be yung regional situation. Third is global.
Yeah.
And ang nag-i-intersect yan sa China as far as I'm concerned. So we need to be worried. So ang akin naman, ang ginagawa ko na lang, we have to engage these people that have legitimate grievances naman sa government in terms of policies
absolutely, yeah.
Have a great negative impact on the public welfare. So tama lang naman yun. But engage natin and konting reminder na okay, wala namang problema mag-convey kayo ng negative ng dissent to At the end of the day kasi Richard, ito yung difference between yung administration ngayon tsaka before. The fact that we are openly discussing this and they are openly discussing about going to a public rally to make a statement means that the conditions are permissive. Pwede mo express yung ano mo
democratic space. I mean, in fact, Senator De Lima, I mean, no one can question her commitment to democracy. She said, at least now there's democratic space. I'm not fan of BBM. None of us are. But, I mean, yun nga eh, parang false equivalence ang ginagawa dito eh. I'm not saying BBM is okay. We have a million problem with them, right? But, iba yung Duterte. There's the China element. There's the EJK elements. There's the direct assault on the constitutional order element. I'm just having a hard time understanding why some people have a hard time understanding that. But actually, maybe
Saka
not. Maybe I know why.
isa pa rin, isa pang nakita ko dito. Again, I'm also not pro BBM. I voted a different president. Uh, Good or bad, the
You didn't have
information
to say
flows.
that, Admiral. No, I'm just kidding. Hindi, hindi, okay lang, okay lang. Na, joke lang, joke lang.
Good or bad, the information is available out there.
Sure,
That's
yeah.
why there are the basis for protest eh. Kasi meron information available. But before, tabu yun eh. Hindi nga, I don't know kung alam ba ng tao na mas more than 10 trillion yung utang during the previous administration. Na minanan ng current administration. Mga ganun ba?
Yeah.
Or
No,
what
sorry for mentioning that. Okay, so I'll spell this out. Etong narrative ng essentially mga kaibigan natin na DDS, di ba? Ang narrative nila, eto kay Sara Duterte, million lang pinag-usapan. Eto kay BBM, billions ang pinag-usapan. My counter-argument to that would be very simple. Well, balikan natin yung Farmali. Balikan natin yung mga questionable practices under Duterte. Those were billions too. But for some reason, some of our friends are all focused on the latest scandals, real or not. Why are they not talking about the Farmali issues? This is not whataboutism. This is about consistency in calling out anomalies. And what's happening right now is that you're making it much easier for the Duterte camp and for the pro-China element, for that matter, to really muddy the water, undermine the government, etc. But by the way, Admiral, just to be clear, I don't know if you want to say it. On my part, I've openly made it clear to the government that, hoy, umayos din kayo because kung magkakalat kayo dyan sa budget issue, gagamitin talaga ng kabila yan. So it's not like we are not also directly telling this to the guys in the government to get their act together, right? We have been warning this openly, right? Openly, on the record, right? So it's not like we're not also saying anything, right? We're saying even directly to them, hey, get your thing together. What the heck?
Isa pa, given yung current context ng politics natin, if you're going to protest against certain policies, kumpletuhin natin.
Exactly. Let's go all the way, yeah.
Ibalik pa rin natin, iprotesta pa rin natin yung abuso ng confidential funds sa conversation. Hindi pwedeng mawala yun. Eh. Kasi kung if you're just focusing on the national budget or the PhilHealth issue or DPW's DepEd, yung budget, then we forget about the confidential funds. So parang ano yun, again, because we do not want to strengthen yung kabilang side. So dapat nasa kasi pero mo magrarally ka o magpo-protest ka. Kukunin yung video na yun, then nila yun.
100%. 100%.
I mean,
100%.
fair is fair, di ba? So we need to also be consistent. If we're protesting against this policy, let's protest also with the other violations. Para hindi tayo kumbaga protesting against one party and we forgot about the other party.
Mahirap. It's a very hard situation, right? I mean, again, hindi ko sinasabi enabling, parang unwitting enabling ang pwede mangyari dito with dire consequences for our national security, among other things. But again, I'm not saying this to... Kasi alam ko ma-accuse tayo ng securitizing, di ba? That we're securitizing the issue, therefore we want... Hindi. I mean, my goodness, keep on going back to this PhilHealth and other issues and all, and other controversies, all of that. But, I really need that you, Admiral, to join us to just really highlight that we are in the middle of an active, liquid, multi-dimensional warfare as we speak, right? Kung sana lang meron tayong treason laws for peacetime, medyo I think we have a strong case against a couple of people at the very least, diba? I mean, this is crazy. We already have deep fake cases, attacks against BBM, against the government. We know that ASPI, among others, have detected China-based elements pushing this. I just hope people don't forget that element. That's big picture is very important. But then again, maybe this is our myopia because we're too national security focused. We're too West Philippine Sea. I don't know. For you, Admiral, I know you're also you're an academic too. You're a professor of practice. I can even call you an activist, someone who believes in good governance and all. I know for a fact that you're helping a lot of good people. Ikaw, what do you think should be the roadmap for, let's just call it the good guys? So even these people, I mean, all of us, we want to be good guys, but what is the responsible way to be the good guys? how should we handle the burden of responsibility given how the Philippines is in the middle of his what I call double Cold War, US, China, Duterte, Marcos, and then the connection, the proxy aspect?
Well, ang akin kasi play the long game eh. Ang long game ko, is a very short one actually, is 2028.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, yung 2028 scenario natin must not be somebody sitting in the presidency that will hand over the country to China.
Yeah.
So, personally, I'm indifferent kung sino man yan, but to make sure that, and I think you can already know ano yung ibig ko sabihin, that we avoid.
No, I don't know, Admiral. I'm
Yeah. So yun yung long game ko. Now, anything that is any other issues peripheral to that, subordinate to that problem.
Right.
Okay. So we need to take care of yung 2020 natin na hindi tayo maging probinsya ng China.
Na wala Manchurian candidate.
Yeah.
Last part, Admiral, I think this is my part of repenting. For some reason, yung mga kaibigan natin sa Taiwan are not reaching out to me as much. I think marami nagalit sa akin sa Taiwan when I said we should use the Taiwan card to get more on West Philippines. I mean, this is the back and forth you and I have been having, right? Your argument is Taiwan is a bigger threat if China takes over Taiwan. My argument is we're just too weak to be involved on the Taiwan issue. West Philippines is more urgent. So maybe we'll do 5% out of 100% and then let Japan and Australia and US do it. So essentially leverage the Taiwan. But I love Taiwan. I was a fellow in Taiwan. I care for Taiwan. Of course, I don't want China to be our immediate neighbor to the north. Balikan natin itong Taiwan issue na ito. How do you see the Taiwan issue evolving or becoming even more poignant under Trump 2.0 administration, which is in a matter of weeks?
Okay, I'm gonna tweak that question and answer you from a point of view of China or Beijing. Okay, kasi if my core interest is Taiwan, then the Philippines is I must to be able to accomplish yung objective ko sa Taiwan. I must neutralize the Philippines for one
Right.
simple reason. Kasi it will complicate my calculation. So I must first do away with the Philippines as a factor para I can execute my Taiwan scenario.
It's like Germany taking rid of Poland so that the road is paved to Moscow, right? I mean,
So in military parlance, sa planning process yan, there's such thing as ano yung main effort ko, ano yung secondary effort ko. So if my main effort is Taiwan, my secondary effort is actually Japan and the Philippines. Okay. Parang example, why did the Japan attack the Philippines during the Second World War? Kasi it's in the way. Ano ba yung objective ng Japan? Yung southern resource area, which is yung oil field dun sa Indonesia.
right.
Okay, so we were in the way. So the only way that they can safely take over that region where the oil is available is to make sure that the Philippines is no longer a threat. So they had to invade the Philippines. Okay, so for China, they had to quote-unquote neutralize the Philippines either politically or economically to make sure na hindi siya magiging factor. Okay. So anything that we do actually disrupts, pangbanggulo tayo dun sa ano niya nanggugulo tayo whatever actions we take, kaya kung gusto nila sa atin, defenseless. Para they don't have to bother with us anymore.
Right.
Okay. Kaya they would, ang pinakaluhan
Sagabal tayo sa kanila.
If the low-hanging fruit, if they can have somebody in charge of Philippines na friendly to them, that solves itself.
Right.
Kumbaga, bawas sakit ng ulo na nila. So that's very, kaya sa akin, between the West Philippine Sea at saka yung foreign interference, sa akin, mas problematic and mas dapat focus tayo on foreign interference. Kasi yun yung would be the main effort nila sa atin. In terms of neutralizing the Philippines. Compared to yung anything kinetic o anything physical doon sa West Philippine Sea. Ano lang yun, intramurals lang sa kanila, parang sideshow lang yun.
Which then again goes back to what I've been saying. They have every reason to take advantage of any kind of destabilization, whether genuine, whether based on legitimate grievances or not. Now, last part of our discussion, Admiral. So we had this discussion with, I think, soon-to-be President Sikorski of Poland, right? This idea that the Philippines is kind of the Poland of Asia, right? An emerging middle power who's historically traumatized by different imperial power, but eventually has to get its act together, and it's almost at the front line, right? So if Taiwan is kind of like Ukraine, we're the Poland. You came up with the theory of victory, because I think this is a very important thing. Ako, ang parati kong sinasabi over the past year or two is, kailangan natin ng baseline. What is the acceptable thing for us when it comes to discussing West Philippine Sea? For me, I have no problem with us disagreeing with the policies of the administration or not. But when you consistently just parrot the China line, medyo ibang baseline po yan, right? Medyo kailangan investigate ano nangyari dito, di ba? But what you also made very important is what is also the ceiling, di ba? So clear tayo sa baseline. What is acceptable for any patriotic, self-respecting democracy, pluralistic, but at the same time, what is achievable, what is feasible for us as an emerging or emergent middle power, as a kind of a Poland of Asia? Can you elucidate, Admiral? Because I think you're the only one I know out there in the Philippines who was consciously tried to explore the notion of the end game here. What is the end game for the Philippines?
Okay, yung end game natin, yung theory victory that you mentioned, that I wrote or drafted, are describing the attributes of what would consist of victory. Okay?
Right.
Now, the one essential component doon is yung tinatawag kong national will.
Right.
Yung national will. Babalik tayo, I think we've discussed it before. Yung COD war between the UK and Iceland. And one of the reasons why when we asked bakit nanalo yung Iceland against UK during the COD war was primarily because of national will.
Right.
The national will is dalawang component. Yung political will ng state and the people's will. So state and people together having that comprehensive national will to actually fight for what is morally right and acceptable na entitlement ng Pilipinas.
Right.
And that is our sovereign rights, our sovereignty, and our entitlements, legal entitlements. Yung theory of victory does not rest on fighting with China. At in fact, ang inano ko doon, if we fight with China, that means that's not a theory of victory.
Yeah.
I mean, we should try to avoid that. Kaya yung sinasabi ko yung theory of victory na dinraft ko has two components. A strategy of denial in current times and a strategy of cost imposition strategy in times of war. Kumbaga, ipapactor mo na yun. Na, okay, meron kang pang current times, meron kang pang conflict time. Okay. So yung strategy of denial is basically, again, to prevent China from declaring victory. And when you say victory, we're talking of different dimensions. No? So it's the political, the economic, the socio-political,
right.
The issues of legal. So damay-damay na yun. And of course, military. So in all those dimensions of dapat mahaharang natin si China from claiming victory. So that means we need to, let's say for example, one of the vulnerabilities na nakita ko na we need to reclaim is energy security. Okay. If you're familiar with yung pumunta yung taga-University of William and Mary,
right?
They were presenting yung result ng research nila on Chinese
pledge trap. Yeah. They interviewed me. Yeah. I know those people. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were presenting yung basically for the Philippines.
Debt trap. I came up with the term pledge trap. Debt trap. Yeah.
Yeah. They were presenting yung result ng research nila on Chinese investment in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just taking one example. So lumalabas doon of the total 8 billion, maliit lang 8 billion na invest in China since the early 2000s. 3 billion is on energy. So energy yung pinakamataas nilang
Yeah.
type of investment. So that means
Right.
kung malisyoso ka, ay malisyoso naman tayo pareho.
Exactly.
Ang ano ko doon, ang
Critical
assessment ko doon,
infrastructure, yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
ang target nila is energy. Doon tayo nila, yun yung nakita nilang vulnerability na papasukan nila. So that's why they're investing in energy. Okay. Of course, alam naman natin yung NGCP.
So you're saying those are corrosive investments, if not predatory or potentially sabotage-driven investments.
Correct. Tapos, ganito may foothold na sila sa NGCP.
Right.
They're preventing us from exploring rebound. And now they are actively trying to pedal investments on energy with us. Kumaga, stage tayo ron sa read bank para hindi makapag-explore. So, tapos hawak na nila NGCP, then meron silang investment. So parang kinakanalize tayo to a policy direction na okay, ipit tayo dito sa dalawa, sige, tangkapin na natin yung investment sila.
Right.
Then hawak na talaga nila tayo talaga sa energy in terms of energy security. So that's one. So we need to deny them that victory in that sector. In that sector alone. And there are other areas na vulnerable tayo. Okay. So this has nothing to do with military, no? Na dimension. Iba yon. Now for yung military naman, sa Navy naman, we've addressed that before. Kaya lang, siyempre, babalik tayo sa AFP modernization, we can only support so much. Okay. So if you look at the reason why we went into the BrahMos anti-ship missile system, because that's a sea denial, that's part of the sea denial strategy namin. Okay, we're not going to fight China ship for ship kasi we don't have the industrial capacity.
Yeah.
Kung yung US Navy na nahirapan, how much more time?
Yeah.
That's why ang ano natin, okay, lalabanan natin sila sa lupa. But of course, that's not enough. You need a host of other systems. No? Kaya sila nakita mo yung reaction nila doon sa Typhoon missile system. Almost kumbaga babangga na nila yung ulo nila sa pader sa inis sa atin.
Oh, and then suddenly sasabihin nila, but one battery wouldn't make a lot of difference. May mga bitter ba silang comments na gano'n?
Oh, but ito rule of thumb ko eh. Pag umangal yung China in a certain that means we're doing right thing. Pag hindi sila umangal, ang rule of thumb ko doon, walang epekto sa kanila.
Si General Loico almost said exactly the same thing. We must be doing something right.
Yeah.
They're like pissed off big time. Do you think we should get more of typhoons ourselves? Do you think we're in a position financially, logistically? Because we're already practicing it from what I understand.
Now, baka kasi number one, baka US will not allow us to sell, they will not sell to us. Kasi that's an offensive system eh. So we need to look for alternative. South Korea or maybe India also.
What could be the intermediate missile systems na reasonable na we can get?
Meron sila. Meron. Okay.
But South Korea got the THAAD system. Israel got the THAAD system. Maybe THAAD system?
Hindi THAAD. Ginawa lang for South Korea, bago lang. I forgot the name kasi Korean name.
No. What I'm saying is that the US deployed THAAD systems to South Korea and also to Israel, among others. So why shouldn't they deploy it here? Heritage Foundation just had a report that they're recommending F-16 fighters, THAAD missile deployment, and a couple of interesting warships and missile systems.
The THAAD is an air defense system. So it's to prevent yung entry of missiles coming to us. Okay. In the case of South Korea, it is to prevent yung attack on yung US forces
from North Korea, yeah.
That Typhoon is an offensive system. So yun yung doon. So kung papayagan tayo ng US, all the more maganda. But kung hindi, I think they control the missile, we control the launcher.
That's a conjugal arrangement.
Kasi the way they think is ang tanong kasi Amerikano kasi mag-isip niyan is, I don't give you something that would create problems for me in the future.
Yeah, I know. Hot-headed
Okay.
Filipinos getting us into trouble. Yeah, yeah.
Well, kasi obviously, ang titingnan nila niyan, ang worst case scenario, what if a trigger-happy Filipino decides to push the button?
Right.
Right? So, that's one way na nakita ko. Happy tayo sa tayo may-ari ng launcher sa kanila yung missile. Then you create a rules of engagement ecosystem na both Philippines and the US
Right.
has to agree on before that missile is launched. Then maybe they will agree to have that yung but yung current setup is already working na eh. Yung naka-pre-deploy lang dito for
The
exercise.
conjugal. Do you see more
na control
deployments?
nila. Yeah.
Do you see more batteries being deployed? More Typhoon battery, like one in Cagayan, one in Lawag, maybe something like that. One in Subic, I don't know.
Ang nakita ko kasi it's a prototype eh. Yung Typhoon missile system is a prototype.
Right.
So
Beta pa siya.
so hindi, it's workable. Yung concept, tinest nila yung nag-proof of concept sila eh. So the concept is workable. They were using existing systems naman eh.
Yeah.
Kaya lang, they might need to build more batteries for that.
Last point, what should we push for and what should we realistically expect under Trump administration, assuming Trump doesn't do like grand bargain, blah, blah, blah. Let's just say Trump 2.0 will be just as aggressive on China, if not more, because China is more powerful, because the Elbridge Colbys are even more influential now, right? What should we get in exchange? What should we ask from them big time?
Sa akin lang is to push or continue with the commitment based on the bilateral security guidelines between DOD at DND, yung bilateral security dialogue,
right,
the recent one, and yung commitment during the trilateral summit sa Washington DC last, I think it was June, yung between Japan, the Philippines, sa US.
Yeah.
Kasi
with
yung
si Jake
doon naman
Sullivan,
very very comprehensive na yun. So if we just follow, if they just comply with the commitments doon, I think we are all good then. So
stick to essentially the plan. No need for anything special or bombastic or anything like that. On that very I don't know, I can say encouraging or something. Not thank you so much, Admiral, and maybe next time if you have information on speaking of. Well, have you heard from Harry Roque recently, Admiral? I mean, like, parang nami-miss ko na yung mga banat ni Harry Roque bot, yung mga US-China, yung mga ganon. Just in case you have information, maybe you can share. Meron kaming ganon episode, where in the world is Harry Roque. But,
parang may game where the world is Carmen's.
Ay, yung mga ganon. Doris. Like, something like that. Hanapin namin yan. Because speaking of him, di ba, ang shtick niya back in the day was anti-US bases. Right? Ang shtick niya is makabayan siya, na ayaw niya yung mga Amerikano nandito. And as we speak, a lot of people are saying, we're selling out our country to the US and putting ourselves, we'll be the next Ukraine daw and all of that. Parati ang joke ko pag they say we'll be the next Ukraine. Sabi ko, sigurado niyo you're not the next Russia, losing 600,000 of your servicemen and all of that. Actually, I'm not happy that 600,000 died in Russia, from Russia or got injured, because ito yung mga kawawang Russians. Ito yung mga, these are desperate. These are not Russians who really went there out of their will. So it's actually, I don't take any pleasure out of all of those casualties. But, the lesson of Ukraine is not that kawawang Ukraine. The lesson of Ukraine is that if you get your act together and fight back, people will help you even though they're not your ally. Thank you so much, Admiral. Hopefully, we can catch up soon again as we see more developments on this front. And if you hear more from other channels na baka nag-respond na naman sila sa mga banat natin, paki-inform ako because I don't have time to listen to other channels. No, I'm just kidding. I think natamaan yata yung iba sa sinasabi ko. Hey, I'm not saying do not criticize BBM. I'm just saying, wag yung content mo is 95% attacking PhilHealth and DepEd budget and all, and halos wala na tayong sinasabi sa mga Dutertes when in fact, we might be at the crucial moment when the Dutertes are really vulnerable to being held accountable for everything, right? So, yun lang. And between the two of them, I know who's gonna sell out the Philippines to China. Just to be clear about that. Thank you so much, Admiral. On that note, is there anything else? I mean, I already went through I think 3 of your works I cited. Hindi ka ba natutuwa, Admiral? I go through. I really pay attention like quote by quote, diba? Like medyo high level na tayo this year. But fantastic work. So I really suggest for those people who are interested, so at least 3 of works by the good Admiral, Navigating the Pitfalls of Domestic Politics, AFP's Role in a State in Distress on December 30, 2024 on Rappler. And December 14 naman, We Need a Denial Strategy or Lose the West Philippine Sea. And then, of course, this is really a good paper. I really suggest everyone to read it. Towards a Filipino Theory of Victory. It's a policy paper no October 2024. I'm also proud because one of my former students, si Derek, also contributed to this. So more power to new generation of thinkers and more power to you, Admiral, for overseeing this fantastic effort to push the boundaries of strategic thinking in the Philippines. And si Admiral ang tawag kasi, hindi ko sinabi yung Secretary of Justice. Hindi ka tulad ni Ronald, even sa TV, he mistakes names like, kaya tawag, Justice, salamat, thank you very much, the greatest Admiral in the world. Thank you very much. Thank you very
From
much.
Bogdan. Thank you, thank you.
Talk to you soon po. God bless. Ayan, guys. Thank you so much. May mga comment, bakit ko pinalitan yung damit ko? Why not yung social na damit, old rich, feeling rich? Bakit parang natatamaan yata yung iba? No, I'm just, actually, it's a friendly advice. Hindi ko naman sila kausap, di naman kami nagko-collaborate or anything, so I don't know what's going on in their head. I'm just saying, huwag kayo masyadong excited na purong bashing lang BBM. Don't forget, andyan pa rin mga Dutertes. And if you want to talk about billions, let's talk about Farmali. You want to talk about crimes, let's talk about EJK and everything like that. I'm just saying, let's keep certain things in touch, in mind and the big picture. On that note, maraming salamat. Thank you very much and talk to you soon. Ciao.